So let's take an example that we all face, chat, text messaging. So let's say there's two people. Nancy's on the left, and she's working on a document, and John's on the right. And John suddenly remembers, I need to ask Nancy for that document before I forget, right? So when he sends her that message, it blows away her attention, right? And that's what we're doing all the time. We're bulldozing each other's attention left and right. And there's serious cost to this, because every time we interrupt each other, it takes us about 23 minutes on average to refocus our attention. We actually cycle through 2 different projects before we come back to the original thing we were doing. This is Gloria Mark's research combined with Microsoft research that showed this. And her research also shows that it actually trains bad habits. The more interruptions we get externally, it's conditioning and training us to interrupt ourselves. We actually self-interrupt about every 3.5 minutes. This is crazy. So how do we fix this? Because Nancy and John are in this all-or-nothing relationship. Nancy might want to disconnect, but then she'd be worried, what if I'm missing something important? So design can fix this problem. So let's say you have Nancy again on the left, John on the right, and John remembers, I need to send Nancy that document, except this time, Nancy can mark that she's focused. Let's say she drags a slider and says, I want to be focused for 30 minutes. So bam, she's focused. Now, when John wants to message her, he can get the thought off of his mind, because he has a need, right? He has this thought, and he needs to dump it out before he forgets. Except in this time, it holds the messages so that Nancy can still focus, but John can get the thought off of his mind, right? But this only works if one last thing is true, which is that Nancy needs to know that if something is truly important, that John can still interrupt. But instead of having constant accidental or mindless interruptions, we're now only creating conscious interruptions, right? So we're doing 2 things here. We're creating a new choice for both Nancy and John. But there's a second subtle thing we're doing here too. And that's that we're changing the question that we're answering. Instead of the goal of chat being, let's design it so that it's easy to send a message, right? That's the goal of chat. It should be really easy to send a message to someone. We change the goal to something deeper and a human value, which is, let's create the highest possible quality communication and relationship between 2 people. So we upgraded the goal. Now, do designers actually care about this? Do we want to have conversations about what these deeper human goals are? Well, I'll tell you one story, which is about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I got to help organize a meeting between some of technology's leading designers and Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is an international spokesperson for mindfulness and meditation. And it was the most amazing meeting. You have to imagine, picture a room. On one side of the room, you have a bunch of tech geeks, right? On the other side of the room, you have a bunch of long brown robed, shaved heads, Buddhist monks, right? And the questions were about the deepest human values. Like, what does the future of technology look like when you're designing for the deepest questions and the deepest human values? And our conversation centered on listening more deeply to what those values might be. He joked in our conversation that what if instead of a spell check, you had a compassion check, meaning you might highlight a word that might be accidentally abrasive, perceived as abrasive by someone else. So does this kind of conversation happen in the real world, not just in these design meetings? Well, the answer is yes, and one of my favorites is couchsurfing. If you didn't know, couchsurfing is a website that matches people who are looking for a place to stay with a free couch from someone who's trying to offer it. So, great service. What would their design goal be? What are you designing for if you work at couchsurfing? Well, you would think it's to match guests with hosts, right? That's a pretty good goal. But that would kind of be like our goal with messaging before, where we're just trying to deliver a message. So what's the deeper human goal? Well, they set their goal as the need to create lasting, positive experiences and relationships between people who've never met before. And the most amazing thing about this was in 2007, they introduced a way to measure this, which is incredible. I'll tell you how it works. Every design goal that you have to have a corresponding measurement to know how you're doing, right? A way of measuring success. So what they do is say, let's say you take two people who meet up, and they take the number of days those two people spent together, right? And then they estimate how many hours were in those days. How many hours did those two people spend together? And then after they spend those time together, they ask both of them, how positive was your experience? Did you have a good experience with this person that you met, right? And they subtract from those positive hours the amount of time people spent on the website, because that's a cost to people's lives. Why should we value that as success? And what you were left with is something they referred to as net orchestrated conviviality, or really just the net good times created, the net hours that would have never existed had couchsurfing not existed. Can you imagine how inspiring it would be to come to work every day and measure your success in the actual net new contribution of hours in people's lives that are positive, that would have never existed if you didn't do what you were about to do at work today? Can you imagine a whole world that worked this way?